Welcome to Standard 16C. In this standard, we'll describe a term called economic interdependence, including the rise of multinational corporations, international organizations, and trade agreements. Even though the word interdependence and the word independence look and sound sort of similar, they're really very different terms. Independence meaning not needing anyone or anything. Interdependence, as we'll see in this presentation, is the opposite. To be interdependent means to not be alone, to need one another. Economically, in this case, economic interdependence. And multinational corporations refers to companies that do business in more than one country. Okay, so they've moved out beyond the country that they began in and now operate in many different countries. So our essential question we're attempting to answer here is, how is economic interdependence changing the world? You've been kind of born into this interdependent world, and so it might not even seem strange anymore, and yet it is a change that you might have an American flag flying outside your home that's made in a factory in China. You might be driving your first car. It might be a Honda, a Japanese car company, but the car might have been made here in the United States, in Tennessee or South Carolina. These are examples of economic interdependence. First case, United States and China. Second case, United States and Japan. Oftentimes, a single product has many different aspects of interdependence. You might have a Samsung phone, Samsung being a South Korean company. Well, the battery for that phone, that might have been the cobalt and the other materials for that battery might have been mined, by kids. I mean, the reality of it is kids mining in Congo and other Central African countries might have gotten the materials for the batteries for that phone from South Korea, and now you're sitting in class having downloaded music to listen to these guys, One Direction from England, or maybe you're listening to Drake from Canada, or you're listening to Rihanna from Barbados, or maybe you're not into music, you're sitting and you're watching highlights of Messi scoring goals for Barcelona in Spain, even though he's born in Argentina. This is the world that we live in, where everything is so interconnected, interdependent on everything else. Okay? You often hear people say the world is becoming a smaller place, and economically, this is what we mean by it. Okay, so some essential understanding is that the countries of the world are increasingly more and more dependent on each other for raw materials. By raw materials, we mean natural resources. For markets, places to trade their products. Companies are no longer content just to sell things in the country that they started in. They want to expand overseas to other places. For example, McDonald's. McDonald's is an American company, but McDonald's has made a point of trying to sell probably in just about every country in the world, even ones like India where there's not a natural fit. McDonald's getting its start selling hamburgers, going to a country like India where a large percentage of the population won't eat any kind of beef products. McDonald's has had to adopt its menu in order to meet the needs and the wants of consumers there in India. But again, McDonald's didn't let that stop them. They adjusted, to do business there. And also financial resources. Money flows around the world. If somebody has a good idea, it doesn't matter where it is, people with money will find them and invest in their idea and their product and their technology. Money, just like everything else now, is moving around the world in ways that historically we haven't seen before. Okay, so how did we get to this point? What's different now? What's allowing this to happen? Our first thing here has to do with transportation and communications. We can move around the world in ways that we couldn't do before. Okay, we have very rapid, very fast, very quick transportation that allows people to move back and forth very quickly. We're looking here at the train coming out of what they call the tunnel underneath the English Channel linking England and France. Again, two countries that historically the English Channel had separated and made trade and travel difficult between. Today, you can get on a train and in 2.5 hours be from London to Paris. Okay, so transportation in that sense, both for travel, for tourism, for business, for diplomacy, for politicians traveling back and forth, this has made things much easier. Air travel. You can look at an example like Christopher Columbus back 500 years ago took 5 weeks on a boat to get across the Atlantic Ocean. 5 weeks, you can hop on a plane at Dulles and be in Spain in 5-6 hours. So there's another example of how our fast and quick transportation has made the world that we know it now a possibility. Communications, the idea that whether it's on one side of the school or around the world, if something happens, you now know about. And you don't even need voice communication now. Of course, with texting, computers and computer networks are spread around the world. All corners of the world you're going to find people using technology to communicate, to do business, to entertain themselves, all sorts of things being done with computers. And the sky's the limit. What's cool and new now, what you're very advanced with technologically, 5-10 years from now, it's going to be obsolete. So there'll be something new coming down the pike. We just don't even know what that is just yet. Okay, another thing going on in the world economically is the rise and influence of these what we call multinational corporations. And as we said at the very beginning, these are the companies doing business in many countries. Historically, companies typically did business where they were formed. Transportation made it difficult to move products, to move people very far. Now, with communication improvements, with transportation improvements, the companies you see here up on the screen, McDonald's, Starbucks, Apple, Coca-Cola, they can do business all around the world today. So as you travel, you can go to Central America and see Coca-Cola products. You can go to the Middle East and see Starbucks being sold. You can go to East Asia and see Apple stores there. Okay, so in other words, these companies, they're worldwide. Okay, and so that is a change as well, the number and the influence of these multinational corporations. We see the changing role of international boundaries which once were sort of almost barriers to people, to money, to ideas. We're really seeing those break down. The idea of boundaries as we've historically known them is really changing because, again, technology doesn't really respect or know boundaries. And increasingly, money doesn't really respect or know boundaries. We can use an example, again, to use sports as an example. We can look at somebody like David Beckham, the soccer player. David Beckham's an English soccer player, but he didn't play his whole career in England. Okay, I mean, he played for Manchester United, he played in Madrid, he played in Milan, he played in Los Angeles, he played, I believe, a season in Paris. The guy has homes in England, he has home in Beverly Hills, he has home in Miami, home in Paris. I think he owns a vineyard out in California. So a guy here who traditionally you would consider English. He was born and raised and became famous in England, but David Beckham, he's international. I mean, his life, his money, his lifestyle is a very international one. And increasingly we're seeing that not just with people, but with businesses and other things as well, kind of challenging what boundaries have historically meant. Okay, we're also seeing more and more regional integration. Okay, integration really means bringing together smaller pieces into a whole. Okay, so for example, we see here the many countries of Europe, 28 of whom have in the last around 1992, I believe, joined together to form what's called the European Union, or the EU, which is an economic and political partnership. You look back through the standards of this course and we see all the conflict and all the wars fought in Europe, and yet these countries have agreed to put aside their nationalism, their differences in language, religion, history, and they've banded together in the dark blue countries here to form the European Union. In other words, all of that nationalism that's been such a driving force in European history has in many ways been put aside in favor of cooperation. And in fact, if you go to Europe today, you can travel through these 28 countries using a single currency called the euro. Okay, there's another example, money being easier to use in Europe, another example of how the world's becoming smaller. Okay, again, integration is making the small parts into one bigger part, one bigger whole. Okay, and then last one here, or actually our second last one here, we have trade agreements. More and more we're seeing countries in the world form trade agreements, such as the North American Free Trade Agreement linking Mexico, Canada, and the United States. These three countries, around the same time that the European Union was getting together, agreed to allow each other's products to travel back and forth without taxes, without tariffs that were normally placed. It was meant as a way to encourage trade between these three countries. So everything here in green is part of NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, lifting a lot of the trade barriers that once existed. Again, another example of how boundaries aren't quite the same thing that they once were. Okay, and then the last thing we have going on is the increasing role of international organizations. The United Nations, which was started back at the end of World War II as a peacekeeping organization, again, it's increasing its influence in world affairs from its headquarters in New York City. It's a place where countries can meet and discuss global issues and try and resolve problems as they come up around the world. Okay, we see the United Nations composed of several different parts: the International Court of Justice, the Secretariat, the General Assembly, where all the countries meet, the Security Council, and the Economic and Security Council. Another example of an international organization would be the International Monetary Fund, which was also formed after World War II with this same idea, not so much of keeping the peace, but of trying to maintain a balanced global economy, a stable global economy. One of the things the International Monetary Fund does is lend money, typically from the countries, the developed countries, to the developing countries to help finance projects that they might not be able to do without outside money. Okay, and that wraps up Standard 16C.